Yo, what is up, guys? Grim here, and we are back from our break, and Betrayal patch notes are here. So, these patch notes are absolutely insane. They're changing pretty much everything about what we know about the Atlas. They're adding new things in, they're reshuffling it completely, and they're also tweaking the density and bosses of a lot of the maps. So, it's absolutely insane. We're going to have to go over everything and refigure it all out again, and we're going to be posting plenty of that content on the channel. So I want to get straight into it. A few of these things might be a little bit of old news, like Atlas objectives, but I wanted to cover them anyway and give my thoughts on them. But we'll try and keep this quick, concise, and to the point. So let's get straight into it. Atlas objectives. So these are being added to the game, and they will be triggered every time you would have gotten a daily before, so once every day, but also when you complete a map, you have a chance to trigger another one. So I'm not going to dwell too much on theory crafting, the things we don't know, but the things we do know is this favors heavily clear speed. We want to go as fast as possible and do the shortest layouts we can. And that's going to be kind of a theme in these patch notes. They really seem to be pushing doing a lot of maps quicker than doing high tier value maps. But then again, they're also adding some tools for that as well. So you'll get more Atlas objectives if you do maps faster. That's basically the thing that I wanted to say. And yeah, that's the Atlas objectives. So next up, we got a kind of a prophecy rework. Really, I wasn't expecting this, but it's very much welcome. Prophecies were one of the most powerful map modifiers in the game, but they were just really awkward and bad to use. So they've done a lot of quality of life changes here, and I'm going to explain just how good they are. So to begin with, they've changed up the UI a little bit. Before you had to fiddle around with like going in and out of the prophecy window. You're no longer going to have to do that. You're going to be able to seek and seal prophecies in the same window, which is going to have the effect that you're going to be able to kind of churn through prophecies much faster. So if you're sitting there with 1,000 silver coins and you're trying to farm prophecies up to sell or for yourself, you're going to be able to get through those silver coins much faster, meaning you'll be able to make more money per hour or get more of the mods you want per hour to use on your maps. So really, really good change. We're probably going to see a lot more prophecies and a lot more people looking at doing prophecies. I plan on making a video on all of the new stuff with prophecies as well. So the next massive change, which is an absolute like colossal thing for mappers, is that prophecies can now trigger in maps that they aren't locked to. And what that means is you won't be able to trigger a prophecy in a map that it doesn't belong to. But before, when you generated a prophecy, it would only like have a few maps that it could trigger in. So it might be able to trigger an atoll map or a coves map. But if you rolled the dice poorly, it wouldn't trigger there. This was a massive problem for specific high value prophecies like Monstrous Treasure and Valwins. And what this essentially made you do was sit there and reseal a prophecy every time it didn't trigger on the map you want. So you had to churn through massive amounts of silver coins, which was just annoying, and you had to go back and seal stuff. So with this change, basically, you can just keep doing maps that you want, and eventually, like if I wanted Monstrous Treasure on Strand, I would just eventually trigger the Monstrous Treasure on that map after enough attempts, and I don't have to go back and reseal it anymore. So massively good change. Going to make prophecies a lot easier to use and a lot better. Next up, they also adjusted the weightings of many prophecies, as well as adding in a few new ones for the masters, as well as also taking a few away, I assume as well for the old masters. So yeah, we're gonna have stuff like Sulfite, Alva, all that kind of stuff in prophecies, which makes it like it's a big incentive to try and go for those. And then we've also got a change in the weightings, so we might see Monstrous Treasure be super rare or maybe even super common. So who knows? Prophecies are back though, and they are better than ever, and I will definitely be looking into farming them up and using them. So next up, I wanted to talk about Zana. So Zana is receiving massive changes in this patch, as well as to her mods. They're becoming a lot more cost efficient. We'll just put it that way. But yeah, to begin with here, she can now sell higher tier maps, and she can now also sell sextants. So this is only going to affect when you level her up. Well, not level her up anymore, you can't do that, but it's going to affect your daily kind of Zana reset. So you're only going to be able to buy items from her every day. But what this will do is it'll help a lot of the more casual players or newer players get into higher tier maps, as well as kind of make it so they don't have to buy maps from other players. So it's a good change. It's not too much of a change for a lot of the more hardcore players, but buying a few sextants might be good. And in those early days, maybe you'll get a few lucky high tier maps off her as well. So next up, completing a map as part of a Zana mission or all that kind of stuff is actually going to count towards your Atlas map completion. So on first glance, this is really great. It's again really great for new players and all that kind of stuff. It's going to help you like complete your Atlas faster and all those good things. But then on the other side of the spectrum, you can say it could be kind of bad for a shaped Atlas strategy. Now, shaped Atlas strategies are kind of being phased out. Not really many people are doing them, like in terms of the hardcore players. But yeah, some people still do them, and if you complete a map as part of a Zana mission, it would mess up your shape strategy potentially and force you to like kind of take that map off of your Atlas again. However, you can bypass this just by clearing the map and then not doing the boss. So it's not too bad, but yeah, definitely an interesting change. I think overall it's a net positive for everyone. So next up, this is a really massive thing, the Zana mods. Absolute insanity. I'm not sure what GGG was thinking or if they just changed their stance on it a little bit, but they've definitely made all of these mods just insanely profitable, so much so to the point where you could just never lose money putting really any of these on there. Obviously, some are going to be better than others, but it's just crazy how many monsters you get from each of these and how cheap they are in terms of chaos. So yeah, it's basically just going to be a super sextant that you're going to try and put on most of your maps, in my opinion. So I'll just go over them here. We've got Anarchy and Torment at 2 chaos. These both kind of suck. No one's going to use these, so don't worry too much about those. We got Domination and Parandus here. So the way it's probably going to work is there's going to be a best one in each of the price brackets. For this one, Domination is pretty similar in what it does to Parandus, although the shrines versus the chests, I think Parandus is just better than Domination. So I don't foresee too many people using Domination. I think most people are just going to use Parandus for the 3 chaos. And Parandus is pretty fantastic. It can drop pretty much any of the items which are legacy, like, well, not legacy, but kind of like vaulted away as part of past leagues. So you can get Headhunter and all that good stuff from a Kadiro. And it's just good to see it back in the mix. I really like Kadiro and he's pretty cool. So yeah, Parandus is definitely a very good option. Next up, we have Breach and Harbinger at 4 chaos. Breach did receive that nerf. I would say it's definitely worse than Harbinger by a significant margin. But running Breach in high T16 maps will give you an increase in chance at getting Chayula breaches. So there is kind of that opportunity to farm up a lot of Chayula sprinters if you wanted to. However, Harbingers, in my opinion, are just better. They drop more maps. They drop the Harbinger currencies, which are always very sought after by players. So I think Harbingers is the clear choice here. And then finally at 5 chaos we have Abyss. So Abyss is going to be trash on anything that doesn't drop item level 82 jewels. But in the case that you are running maps that drop item level 82 jewels, Abyss might just be the best, depending on how much those jewels sell for, will be the case. So if I had to pick how it would go, I would say most people are going to use Breach, Harbinger, or Parandus with a strong favor to Harbinger. I think it's the best out of those 3. And then if you're doing like T14, 15, or 16 maps and you're looking to farm up Abyss jewels and the market for them is good, I think that you can make a lot more money off Abyss. Because at the beginning, searching eye jewels can be worth sometimes 20 chaos each for those item level 82 plus gems. So very, very good there. And then we'll just move on here to a bit of the spicy ones here. So we've got the alternate of the same tier. Again, I like to see these mods come back. They're great for new players, and they do kind of make the beginning mapping experience a bit easier. So these are all fantastic. The noteworthy ones here obviously are the one that will turn T10s into T15s for 6 chaos. That's a very good deal. I'm sure a lot of people will be using this to try and farm up some red maps to sell, although map sales might see a really big dive this league. We'll talk about that at the end of the video. But yeah, and then obviously next up is the free tier 16, which I'm assuming will require you to complete Uber Elder once again. So this map mod by itself is going to be the focal point of my strategy for League Start. Basically, you want to pick a map with 5 white sextant locations on it. unlock this mod and just buy a ton of white maps of that type and just plow into them for 15 chaos and just farm the hell out of Guardian maps with 5 sextants. So this mod in particular is very, very powerful. We'll have to see how low Guardian prices will go due to this mod again. But yeah, definitely very good Zana mods. Insane pricing. They've never been this cheap. I just don't think you can lose money running really any of these. So really fantastic. Just super duper good. So we'll move on to the Atlas Shuffle. This is a really massive, just content addition in my opinion. Every time they do this, people are always excited. They're on Reddit posting what they've found. It's just really great. So we'll go into it here. So the first point here is many of the bosses in the Atlas have been shifted around. So for those of you guys who don't know, a lot of the divination cards in the game are tied to bosses. For example, the Doctor card will always drop in maps which have the boss of Elira. So by moving bosses around, you're essentially moving around some of the divination cards in the game as well. So it's definitely a really big change. In terms of apart from divination cards as well, some bosses are really poor and awkward. For an example, I'll give you the Belfry boss. It's absolutely terrible. It's shocking, but the map itself is really fantastic. It's one of the best maps in the game, and it has a really good divination card that's local to the tile set as well. So if they change that boss, for example, we could see a big shift in the meta to kind of doing that. On the other hand, as well, if you put a really bad boss in something like Underground Sea, you might see a little bit of a pushback on that. You might not see as many people running that. So that's really interesting. So that's with the bosses. Next up, obviously, they have shuffled around the Atlas. I will have a video coming up on that with all the sextant locations and data. That'll probably be today. In terms of that as well, they've also decided to move around a lot of the density and layouts. So this is just a massive change. There's no more to say than that. It's going to turn maps that sucked into maps that could be just the best map. I'm not sure if they're going to take density down a notch in any maps, like Underground Sea, for example. But if they do that, then we could see a really big shift in the meta. But yeah, it sounds the way they phrase this as if they're just going to be buffing maps. So that's really great. We're going to be testing a lot of stuff with that. So here's another one here. They are adding new sextant modifiers to the sextant tables. So this is just a straight up buff to sextants. I'm curious to see if they'll be on white, yellow, or red, or any of that. Because currently white sextants just dominate yellow and reds, not just in price, but just in mod pool as well. A lot of the sextant modifiers that are exclusive to yellows and reds actually suck, so that makes them worse than white sextants. So I'd be interested to see if they add them to maybe yellow or white or even red. So definitely a buff to sextants. We're going to see a lot of Nico, Alva, and Bestiary from this. Next up, they've got a few changes, quality of life changes to the new leagues being introduced as masters. So they've got Abyss. They're increasing the number of monsters in Abyssal Depths. This is fantastic. Before, Abyssal Depths weren't even worth running unless it was item level 84 to get the Stygian Vice. So I welcome this change. It was about time. I think they should have done this in the Abyss League. It'll be interesting to see how dense it actually is, though. But yeah, if it makes it worth running every time, Abyss could be even better than I mentioned before. Next up is Incursion. This is just a small change. Basically, it's going to make it whatever maps you're running, you're going to get that tier and higher by a lot. So it's basically just going to mean you're going to be getting a lot of T16 temples, which is just fine, but it's going to further saturate that map market even more. And that's a recurring theme with this Atlas here as well. All these changes, it's just buffing map drops everywhere. You're just going to be able to sustain so easily. Next up, Delve. So we're going to have more rare items from special encounters, apparently. I'm not entirely sure what that means. But they are changing away some of the drop rates on fossils and resonators, which isn't a big deal. In terms of fossils and resonators, you're going to basically have to go behind fractured walls now, which was fine. This is basically to combat people not cracking down fractured walls and running the same delve path over and over again. So it's basically just a bit of a hotfix to target that abuse that a lot of people were doing. I personally just knocked down the wall anyway, so it's not a really big change to me. And if you're playing standardly, like normally as it's intended, you're not going to notice anything apart from buffed drop rates. So it's fantastic. So they've adjusted the amount of sulfite in maps. They didn't say really if it's up or down. I'm assuming it's probably down, um, especially with how many means we have to get sulfite. We have sextants, master dailies, random master encounters, scarabs. So yeah, I'm assuming they're buffing it down there. So we won't be seeing as much delve, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But yeah, with the amount of access we have, it's not a really big deal. You're going to be getting more than enough delve, unless you're pushing ladder. That's the only people who are going to be disappointed. Next up, just a bit of a quality of life change. They made Stream of Monsters just come out faster. It's depending on how fast, but this is basically a buff to clear speed. A lot of the time you'd be sitting there waiting for your Diviner Strongbox to finally finish the Stream of Monsters. So yeah, definitely just a hard buff there for clear speed, which is great. So now we're going to get into buffs and nerfs. I've kind of split these off into most important and kind of categories. So to begin with, mobility. They're changing a bit of how mobility is calculated with Whirling Blades and Leap Slam. Basically, the way I understand it is you're going to get a lot, well, not a lot, they're going to get slightly less kind of effectiveness and speed out of your Whirling Blades and Leap Slam for investing heavily in using them, like using something like a Bright Beak and stuff like that. But you're going to get more speed if you just kind of partially invest in it. It's basically just opening up which weapons you're allowed to use and all that kind of stuff. So in general, I think it's a good change. It means you don't have to use awkward weapons and you can focus on using fun, high DPS weapons, which is just a good change overall in my opinion. So next up, they're also buffing skill triggers. So I'm a pretty big fan of Cast on Crit, Costry's Malice, and Mjolnir. So this is pretty interesting. In the past, these have been some of the best clear speed builds as well. With the likes of Shield Charge and stuff like that, and Discharge. However, I think that they're a little past their glory days. I think with the AoE nerfs, they won't be as powerful. If something is going to do well, I believe it will be Arc, Cast on Crit, or Arc Mjolnir. We'll just have to see though. I don't think it really holds a candle to like Vile Spark in its current form, Tornado Shot, or really any of that stuff. So I think it's really cool. And it might be good on maps like Channel and stuff like that, especially with like Cast on Crit Discharge. But I think that Auto Bomber kind of just outshines all of these options in a lot of ways for clear speed. But yeah, definitely a really cool change. I'm excited to see it come back. Next up, we've got auras. So they have made it so that you can now regenerate energy shield as a support using blood magic with all your life reserved. That's a big buff. Before you needed to use a Shavron's Revelation to do that, but now you no longer have to use that ring, so it's a straight up buff for blood magic aura bots, which is fantastic. In addition to that, they've made Vile Auras instant cast. So in the past, I've actually had to use a faster casting on my Vile Haste because it's so slow, but now it's just instant, which is fantastic. Frees up a gem slot. We can level another gem in there, or put something else in there. So it's a straight up buff for clear speed here and aura bots, which is fantastic. Next up, not so many buffs, which is kind of bad. They're actually nerfing Magic Find and clear speed, targeting one specific build, I might add, which is Queen of the Forest Windripper, which is a bit of a shame. But we'll go into the nerfs here. So on the Windripper bow, they are nerfing crits by a lot. They're basically halving the bonus crit on the bow, but they're trying to say that they're making up for it with a bit of extra added damage, but that's useless. We get all our damage from Abyss Jewels anyway, and stuff like auras. So it's basically just a straight up nerf to Windripper by a few percent on the crit. It's still definitely probably the best bow, especially if you're taking into account Magic Find. Even if you're just using a bow, like not even Magic Find, I still think it's probably the best bow. The attack speed is just massive, and it still has decent crit at least, which is pretty good. So yeah, Wind is still very good, no problems there, just a bit of a nerf on the crit. You can counteract that by using an increased crit gem as well. If you're farming T16 maps though, I'd probably look at getting a really good shaped thicket bow now instead for clear speed. Next up, they nerfed Queen of the Forest again. It's not a big deal, but it definitely is a nerf. So the nerf is basically you're going to need the same amount of evasion as you have now to get 75% movement speed versus 100. So it's a straight up 25% movement speed nerf to all Queen of the Forest builds, which isn't insignificant, but it's not massive at the same time. You can make up for that in other areas, but it's definitely a noticeable nerf. You will probably feel it, but it's not too big of a deal. Queen of the Forest is still the best chess piece in the game for Magic Find and clearing, and it still, in my opinion, dominates all movement skills, especially on layouts like Underground Sea. So it's still the number one chess piece. It's still broken, overpowered. It needed to be nerfed more. Basically, it's just too good. Next up, they have a really random and out of the blue nerf to Sedima's Touch. They basically just took a bit of quantity off it. I'm not sure why they did only one item and they didn't just remove the quantity completely and rework the item. I don't like how they're slowly just taking it all away. Um, I'd prefer them to either rework the system or completely take it all away at the same time. But they seem to be just doing it item by item and just making them a little bit worse every time. So yeah, not a big fan of how they're approaching this. I'd like them to just take it all away. But nonetheless, it's just a few points of quant. You're still going to use these gloves if you're using Magic Find, so it's not really much difference. You're just going to lose like 6% quantity, which isn't too bad. Next up, they just nerfed Impulse's shock explosion damage by half. Definitely going to be noticeable. It's not going to be anywhere near as good, but it's still going to be what it is. It's still going to be able to get those like chains, those shock chains. So yeah, you can compensate by having a bit more Herald of Ice damage as well on those BB Elementalist builds. So definitely a nerf, but it doesn't mechanically change how good the item is. Similar to Queen of the Forest, it's just going to be not as good, but still good. Next up, they nerfed stat sticks. I'm not going to talk about this at all. I'm not a stat stick user really, and a lot of people are already talking a lot about this nerf, so we're going to move straight along. One thing I do want to talk about is the immortality nerfs. So I played a decent amount of Delve at the start, was pretty competitive with it. I got to around 900, but then I realized that you need to have an immortal build to continue. To kind of really hit those high delves, it was either be unkillable or just don't even bother, which was really demoralizing in my opinion. It kind of really ruined the competitive feel for it because it was just who could spend the most time, as opposed to who had the coolest build or who had the most like kind of skill. So it really took a lot of the fun out of it in my opinion. So massive nerfs to immortality, in my opinion, is really, really good. So we're seeing a lot of the max resistance go away. You're not even going to be able to get close to max res 100% anymore, which was how you became immortal in a lot of situations in a solo environment. And then they're also targeting the other big abuser of immortality, which was Gluttony of Elements. I'm not sure if you'll be able to keep it up permanently anymore. You shouldn't be able to. Yeah, it's pretty much impossible to keep it up now, from what I understand. So you can no longer be fully immune with Gluttony of Elements or have 100% maximum resistance, which is fantastic. It's going to make Delve a lot more fun for those who intend to push the Delve ladder. It's going to make it more fun to theorycraft Delve builds because you don't have to shoehorn Immortality in there anymore, and it's just a really good change overall in my opinion, and it needed to happen. Uh, in a kind of like in addition to that, they've also changed how Zephy's Last Breath works. The main takeaway here is when you're hit, you're going to lose the flask effect on you, basically, which is a pretty big deal. You can't just AFK Uber Elder with a Zerfi flask anymore, which is very, very big. In addition to that, they also nerfed Indigon, so Poet's Pen is probably still going to be very good, but it's not going to be as good as it was. So they've capped out how much you can get from Indigon. So definitely a few hits to that build as well. So just a few more noteworthy changes here before we get into the final topic, which is Scarabs. Um, they have buffed up Hiri's Ire and made it exclusive for bows. So the reason I have this on here is because one of the hardest things to do as a league start on bows is get that flat added elemental damage and just have enough damage to like kill stuff on the screen without high tier Bistools. And Hiri's Ire now offers that in spades. So you can get like an insane, it's basically a 7 lead now because of all of the added cold on it. It's basically as much as an added cold gem. And it's pretty hard to get 20 or 21 gems on the first day or two. So this is definitely going to be a welcome sight to any bow character who picks this up early. And I'm probably going to be looking at grabbing one before I get my Queen of the Forest just to clear the Atlas out, if I do go with bows. So yeah, really good change. The other one is Carcass Jack. I just put this in here because I like Cyclone. They've changed it from 20% to 40 to 50, so over double. And it looks like they're slowly, reluctantly bringing back AoE, which is pretty cool. I don't think it's going to make too much of a difference because AoE kind of has diminishing returns. But you will probably get 1 or 2 radius out of Carcass Jack extra now with the buff, which is pretty cool. I like that. Just another quick one here I put in. As I'm a big bow player, they did nerf Chinsol a lot. So Chinsol was kind of the go-to bow for endgame. It was kind of the be all end all. It gave you basically double damage when you were at close range, and you could stack that with point blank, and it was really ridiculous. That has been nerfed significantly. They're trying to counteract it by giving it increased physical damage, but I just don't think it's gonna offer the same kind of damage that it used to. So definitely a nerf there. Not too much more to say about that. So we'll move on to the final topic here, which is Scarabs. So you guys haven't heard me talk anything about Scarabs. So I'm going to quickly give my opinion on them, and then we'll get into a few predictions of what they might be. Because we have a full list of what they are, but there's no like text of what they actually do. So I took a few guesses here. So to begin with, I don't like the micromanagement part of Scarabs because it's just every map you're going to have to put them in. I also don't like the idea of having to buy them off other players. That kind of sucks. Especially if they're rarer, because I'll have to buy 1 or 2 at a time. That really blows. However, it's offset by the fact of how cool they are and how powerful their effects are. So a lot of the stuff that's going to pertain to Scarabs is going to come down to how rare they are, how many drop from each syndicate member, and all that kind of stuff. If you get like 5 or 6 per betrayal like encounter or something like that, then everyone's going to use them. But if you only get 1 per like boss, and it could be a bronze, silver, or gold one, then they're going to be very expensive. So yeah, that might change the micromanagement opinion a little bit, but yeah, in my opinion, they're really cool, and I really like how much they open up the space. But I think they do heavily make like Magic Find and group play way too good. I think they're just going to take it way over the edge. You're going to see, we're going to go back to the days of how it was in Vault, where you're just having like 100 times the loot in a 6-man group than a solo player. That's where we're going to get to, in my opinion, and I don't know if that's good or not. But anyway, let's get into the Scarabs. So we have the Breach one. This is probably one of my higher picks for one that I want to be using. So I'm going with a T16 map farm build, and maps drop from breaches, obviously, and also if you're going in T16 maps, you're going to get lots of Chogle splinters. So breach is definitely one of my number one candidates for picking that out. It looks pretty damn good. So yeah, I'm probably going to be putting that in as one of my 3 Scarabs that I'll be looking to pick up and use. Next up is Reliquary Scarab. So I have no idea what this does, and it's going to be pretty difficult to figure that out until we actually get in and see what it does. My guess is that it's something to do with like kind of past league items or maybe even legacy items, because we've had 2 different types of reliquary keys. I'm not entirely sure how they would split that into 3 different scarabs or what that would look like, but yeah, definitely really exciting. This is definitely the Christmas present of this league. What's it going to be? Can't wait to unwrap it. So yeah, super psyched. Next up, Bestiary. Um, so this one I think is going to be pretty weak. You no longer need to target farm specific yellow beasts in maps, so a lot of the value of beasts are going to be pretty gone. It's going to be certain red beasts that can spawn in any map, which hold all the value. And I'm not sure that it's going to be worth farming them, especially when you can't target farm them. So I'm not sure how good this Scarab will be, but in terms of just raw map drops or like currency or anything like that, it's definitely going to be one of the weaker ones. It just depends on how good the bestiary crafts are and if you can like consistently get good beasts. Next up is Shaper and Elder Scarabs. I can only assume that these add Elder and Shaper influence temporarily to a map, which is extremely weak, unfortunately, unless they have some sort of additional mod in there, or I just really don't know what it could be. Maybe Gilded Shaper Scarab adds 3 Shaper influence mods or something like that, but even still, that's pretty weak, especially for Shaper. The best outcome for Elder would just be like Null Portals and Squiddy Boys, which really isn't that great. It's about the equivalent of a sextant or 2. So yeah, it's pretty weak in comparison to the other scarabs. Unless I'm missing something here, you can just get all the benefits of these scarabs just from influence, but we don't know what they do yet, so they could be really good. We'll just have to see. That's my guess. Next up, the Sulfite Scarab. I think this one's going to be really artificially inflated by the people pushing Delve Ladder, if anyone is still doing that. But yeah, otherwise, it's probably just going to be an okay Scarab. Yeah, there's plenty of other options though. Sextants, Prophecies, daily quests, master missions, all that kind of stuff. So I don't know how high it'll be, but it'll definitely probably be inflated by that Delve push ladder thing. So my pick for one of the best, if not the best, Scarab is obviously the Divination Scarab. This is the big magic find Scarab. It's a more multiplier. So basically, after all of your map quant, your magic find, and your group loot, take whatever divination cards you would have got and multiply it by three. So if you would have done 100 maps and gotten a doctor, you'd get three doctors. That's just the way this works, which is just insanity. And this divination card is, well, this divination scarab, sorry, is going to be worth a lot of currency. And stack this with monstrous treasure. My God, I I don't even want to think about how disgusting that is with a six-man group. I'm sure a lot of groups will be abusing the hell out of this, and it's going to be very, very expensive as a result of it. Personally, I won't be using this one solo. I just don't think I can get the value out of it I need. So you're probably going to be restricted to six-man groups. Next up, Torment Scarab. Ghosts kind of suck, so not much to say here. Depending on how many ghosts you get, I guess. But yeah, not so great. Next, Ambush. Ambush is pretty good. It's one of the ones I'm considering along with Breach to put in my maps, depending on how expensive it is. It's just more monsters. You have a chance at some good divination boxes. Sorry, yeah, and stuff like that. And it also stacks with a Sextant modifier that adds 500% quantity from those. So pretty cool. Definitely want to look out for. And then the last two here is Harbinger and Perandus. So Harbinger is pretty insane. We already know that by talking about Zana mods and getting maybe 1 to 3 of them. Not sure how many we'll get yet. Is going to be pretty good. So this is just another solid pick, just like Breach and Ambush. I'd probably say this is the best Scarab for solo players and people grinding kind of T16 maps because the currency that drops from the Harbingers and the map drops are not affected by quantity or player quant or anything like that. So six-man groups can't really abuse this as much. So yeah, this is going to be priced more around the solo player, which is fantastic for like solo players, which is the majority of us. And then lastly, Perandus, another really good one. So it's probably going to be Breach, Harbinger, Perandus for a lot of the time, maybe a bit of Ambush. It's just another fantastic one. I'm assuming it's going to spawn in Kadiro as well, naturally, 33% chance, as well as 1 to 3 chests. Yeah, so that's going to be Scarabs, I think, wrapped up. Really interested to see what Reliquary does and Shaper and Elder ones. Yeah, super psyched for the league overall. The new mechanic actually looks really interesting to me, so we'll be covering that in detail. Expect a absolute truckload of videos now that it's Christmas holidays, and yeah, it's shaping up to be an amazing league. That's all I got for you guys today. We'll be covering a Sextant spreadsheet coming up soon, so look forward to that, and I'll see you guys in the next one.